love is basically three elements. An appreciation of the other person's good, or other being's good. So you notice their qualities. It can be physical, it can be beauty, it can be courage, it can be intelligence. Whatever it is, it's you noticing something about them and recognizing their good, appreciating their good, valuing it. The second major element of love is a desire for them to increase in goodness. It isn't just that that you want them to get stronger or more intelligent or anything like that, but it is at the highest levels possible: virtue, faith, etc., etc. Right? You will goodness in every area of their life that you can. The third area of love, or the third major part of the definition of love, is a desire for union with them. If it was just an appreciation of their love, or of their goodness, and a willing their goodness, that's more abstract than it is anything else. Love seems to require that you desire to be with them, in union with them. So friendship, for example, is you walking with someone through life, right? And if it was just you appreciating their good and willing their good, you don't have to be present with them. But there seems to be something wrong with that. So union seems to be also another necessary element. And union can then be understood in terms of friendship, like I said, also in terms of romantic love, most perfectly characterized by a lifelong marriage. Like those type of people who they hit the end of their life and one spouse dies and the other one dies within minutes or hours. You know, that is actually something that we pay attention to fairly commonly in both the newspapers and in daily life. And then the last element of love that I'll mention is love as sacrifice for the other. I think this is an offshoot of willing their good. It's you actively doing whatever it takes in order to benefit them. If love is just about the enjoyment of the other, that first phase, that appreciation of their goodness, it lacks something at the very core. It ends up being a predator, it's lust or something like that. I like their good and I want to partake in it. But if you're not willing their good, and if you're not doing everything that you can in order to help them achieve their good, then it's selfishness. Right? So love, properly speaking, has to include the idea of sacrifice for the beloved.
Of course, love in English is defined in a variety of different ways. Love refers to sex. Love refers to feelings that people have towards another person that don't have anything to do with sex. I can say that I love you, which I do, but there's no sex involved at all. We could talk about how I love tomatoes or food, or I love this or I love that. In English, we've got one word that is used very, very broadly. And that's part of the problem is when we use that word love, how exactly are we defining it? Now, I teach Greek here, you folks probably know, and in the Greek language, there are three different words that are used that are translated by our English word love. The first one is eros, and that's where we get the word erotic, and that has to do with sexual love. The next one is philos. That's where we get our American city, Philadelphia, a combination of two Greek words, philos, which means love, and adelphos, which means brother. And that's why they call Philadelphia the city of brotherly love. And that's a very strong love, a love of friendship, a love that is very deep and binding. Then there's a third word that is used in Greek, and that's called agape. And it's variously described. Not everybody agrees as to how it's described, but how it's used in the Christian scriptures is that's a deeper love. It's a love that's a sacrificial kind of a love. It's the kind of love that Jesus said is no man loves, no greater love is there than that someone might lay down their life for another. Agape love is the kind of love that says basically you are more important than I am, and I am sincerely interested in your best interests and what's best for you. So it's a very, very deep and binding love, and that's the kind of love that Jesus tells us that God has for us.
The topic I'm going to look at is arranged marriage for dowry. It's a biblical concept, and it takes place in some countries today, and I think in a modified form in some American churches. So let me just talk about a couple of those. I remember in having students give reports in Understanding Christian Faith, church here in the area, the Apostolic Christian Church. It's not that you pick a bride first or a groom, but if you are going to date, this was a few years ago, the boy would say to the leader of the church, I would like to date this girl. And then the pastor would talk, or the leader would talk to the father of the girl, and they would eventually arrange for them to date. Sometimes they marry, sometimes they don't. But I mean, there's a bit of arrangement there. The other year I had a student from Korea go home in the spring, not dating anybody. He came back in the fall and introduced me to his wife that he had never met till he went home, that his father and her grandfather had arranged for this wedding. They live in New Jersey now and have a family. Seem to be getting along real well. I've read in other cultures where the dowry, I read one place where the man said something that he had a 3-cow wife, that it cost him 3 cows to get this wife. So there's dowry involved. Can two people whose marriage arranged love? And my answer is you learn to love.
Alright, so when most people talk about platonic love in the contemporary sense, or in contemporary settings, people typically mean by platonic love, non-romantic love. So they mean love between persons that doesn't involve romance, or even more specifically, love between persons that doesn't involve sex. Now, technically speaking, that's actually not an accurate depiction of platonic love. Platonic love is, in some senses, you might say does involve sex. In other senses, you might say it's this much more abstract sort of notion between a person and not necessarily even another person, right? Sort of between a person and even abstract forms. So instead of thinking about platonic love along those lines, since it doesn't quite match the contemporary notion of platonic love that we typically mean, I think maybe the best way to go is to think about it in Aristotle's terms. And for Aristotle, and I think this is even a part of the Christian tradition, the most important kind of love is friendship. And the reason this is perhaps part of the Christian tradition is because one of the sort of central aspects or central themes of the Christian tradition is being friends with God. That's sort of the highest relationship, the highest form that our love can take is friendship with God. Romantic love doesn't make sense when you're thinking about being in love with God, because God is a spirit. And so you can't have sexual relations with something that is completely disembodied. Sex involves bodies. So friendship, I think, in the Christian tradition is considered the highest form of love. And for Aristotle, I think this is right as well. And so for Aristotle, friendship fundamentally involves a unity between persons who are in the relevant respects identical. So for example, a king and a pauper, a student and a teacher, a mother and a child, a father and a child can't really be friends because there's a fundamental inequality between them. So you have to have a kind of deep equality between the people in the relationship in order for them to be friends. Now love can still exist between parent and child, student and teacher, king and pauper, but it can't be friendship. Friendship has to involve a fundamental kind of identity or equality between the persons. And so this is the way Aristotle defines friendship. And so a paradox arises, a problem arises for the Christian tradition here, because how on earth can finite creatures become friends with God? It looks like we can't, and yet that looks like it's the goal, according to the Christian tradition, is to become friends with God. But we can't be friends with God on the Aristotelian notion because there's a fundamental inequality between us and God. So, I think the Christian tradition actually provides a beautiful, amazing solution to this, and it's in the incarnation of Jesus Christ. God becomes a human, and part of the reason he becomes human is so that we can be friends with him.